We've all heard it said, have multiple ways to receive warnings during times of severe weather. But what exactly are those ways? Hi, I'm Shino Wimberly with the UAH Department of Atmospheric and Earth Science, and today we're going to be talking about the many different ways to stay informed when weather is at its worst. Now, one of the best ways to stay weather aware is with one of these, a weather radio. And you probably have seen these before. You probably have one already in your house. Whenever I say weather radio, this is probably what comes to mind. This is a standard white Midland NOAA Weather Radio. And like I said, it is one of the best ways to stay informed during severe weather, because whenever a watch or warning is issued for your area, these will come on and they'll sound that all famous loud alarm tone, letting you know that there's threatening weather in your area. It doesn't matter if it's 3 o'clock in the afternoon or 3 o'clock at night, these will come on and will alert you during severe weather. And you can even think of it kind of like a smoke detector. In the same way a smoke detector warns you and your family of a fire, these will come on and alert you and warn you of threatening weather in your area. Now, here's the best part about it. Yes, it will give you alerts, but get this, they will stay on even when the power goes out. That's right, even when the power goes out, because of the way it's powered up. Not only do you have the standard AC adapter that you plug into the wall, but you can put 4 AA batteries into these things, and you'll still have that constant connection, that access to those weather warnings from the National Weather Service. And you can think of it like your connection to the Weather Service. Of course, they're the ones who issue the warnings, the severe weather warnings, and they're the ones, of course, that maintain the NOAA Weather Radio transmitters all across the United States. And now there are many varieties of these. There are some like these, just standalone models. We have there are also handheld models. I have one right here, a small little handheld Midland weather radio. There are some that are crankable, some that just use manual power to power it up, some that charge up your phone, some that run off of solar power. So there are many varieties. So if you're going out to buy one the first time, you might be a little confused or even a little intimidated by all the varieties of emergency weather radios that are out there. But generally speaking, we would want you to have something like this, just a standard white Midland weather radio. If you're interested, of course, you can go out and buy them. Those other models I was talking about, the crankable, the ones that charge your phone, those are higher dollar emergency radios. But these, generally speaking, these cost about $20 to $30, these particular models right here. I understand nowadays, especially during these times, not everybody may not have that money, and money is tight. But if you're on the fence about getting one, you really have to think of it not just as this little novelty item, but really as a life-saving investment, not only to your safety, but also to your family's safety, because again, they will provide those weather service alerts during times of severe weather. Now, here's an interesting statistic as we were doing these research for the presentation. The National Weather Service as a whole, overall, currently operates well over 750 transmitters, these NOAA Weather Radio transmitters all across the United States, covering 90% of territory, covering 90% of the land mass across the United States, including places like Puerto Rico, the U.S. Virgin Islands, and the U.S. Pacific territories. So it doesn't matter if you're on a road trip or a cross-country road trip, if you have a NOAA Weather Radio, you will not be without any emergency weather information. Here's a map of the various NOAA Weather Radio transmitters that we have here across the Tennessee Valley, as well as their frequencies. If you've just bought a NOAA Weather Radio for the first time, you will then need to dial in the frequency of the station that is closest to your area to begin receiving warnings. Now, at this point, I'm going to step to the side just a little bit here. If you want to pause the video, if you want to take a picture of this screen here, have it as a reference. Again, if you've just bought one, or maybe you're helping someone program the weather radio, you can have this as a reference. You can see here in North Alabama, we have 7 different transmitters all across the region, from one end of the state to the other, from the Shoals all the way over to Sand Mountain and along the Highway 278 corridor to the south. And up in southern Middle Tennessee, there are 3 transmitters up there along the Highway 64 corridor. Now, the station for us here in Huntsville, Madison County, as well as much of North Alabama, is this station here. It's KIH 20. It operates at 162.400 megahertz, and its coverage range is much of the central part of North Alabama, basically from eastern Lauderdale County to Lawrence County, the I-65 corridor counties of Limestone, Morgan, obviously Madison County here, and then on into western Jackson County. And we're also served secondarily by this station here, this WNG 554, operating out of Winchester, Tennessee at 162.525 megahertz. Now, if you don't already have a weather radio, don't worry, because there are other methods to receive warnings. And one of them is through weather apps. Now, when you hear me say that, when you hear that phrase weather app, that means different things to different people. For example, some of you might be thinking of the stock weather app that comes pre-installed onto your phone. Others might be thinking of more advanced apps like RadarScope. And so there are a lot of apps out there. So you might be confused about, which app is right for you. Specifically how much? Around 10,000 weather apps. According to the Guardian newspaper, there are around 8,000 weather apps on the Google Play Store and about 2,500 on the App Store. 10,000 weather apps. So again, you might think that's like, whoa, which one's right for me? Generally speaking, when we say, have a weather app with you, we want you to have one that will provide you National Weather Service alerts and information sent to you. Now, the good news is here in Huntsville, the TV stations here have done a great job of incorporating apps and having apps that will provide not only those alerts, but other types of alerts as well. We'll talk about each in just a second. Now, I kind of alluded to this, the weather service alerts. Yes, the weather apps, of course, will provide weather service alerts, tornado warnings, and so forth. But here's kind of a benefit, or a one step up from the weather radios that we were talking about. They will provide alerts, those weather service alerts, to your specific location, not just your entire county. Now, the weather radio, of course, is one of the best ways to receive warnings. I have one. It's a great system to have, and it's highly recommended. However, they generally do not follow the polygons. Of course, tornado warnings, severe thunderstorm warnings, they're not issued for entire counties anymore. They're issued for parts of the counties that are going to be impacted. That's those polygons. The weather alerts, those weather apps will send alerts to your specific location. So, for example, if you live in the city of Madison, for example, and if there was a tornado warning for northern Madison County, places like Harvest, Tony, Jeff, up towards Hazel Green, yeah, you'd get that alert sent to your NOAA Weather Radio, but you would not get it sent through the weather app because, again, it's not impacting you directly. You're not included in that weather alert. So that's just kind of one benefit of it. And even more so, these weather apps can provide, in addition to the National Weather Service alerts, will provide even more weather hazard alerts. And we'll talk about each here starting now. One of them is the safety net alerts. Barron Services here in Huntsville, they have apps that provide the safety net alerts, and basically what these are just alerts of other types of weather hazards impacting you in your area. And one of these is what's called a twisting or rotating storm alert. Now, what that is basically if there's a thunderstorm that's rotating, has some rotation, maybe trying to produce a tornado, you'd get that alert. It would be called a rotating or twisting storm alert. And you'd also get, in addition to that, the BTI, the Barron Tornado Index, scale of 1 to 10 of the likelihood of that being a tornado, so it could be a 2.0 or a 5.6, for example. You'd get that alert sent to your phone if you have a Barron app. Now, again, an alert like that, that's not a tornado warning, that's not an official National Weather Service alert. However, it's an extra notification, a little extra tap on the shoulder, letting you know of that threatening weather, of course, in this case, that possibility of a tornado. WHNT, if you have their Live Alert 19 app, they are a Barron partner, so you get an alert like that as well as the safety net alerts. There are also the other weather apps and alerts. There are also lightning alerts, very handy in the summertime when we're all outdoors. Of course, Holly in her other video, she talked about the different hazards of lightning. And so that's very handy in summertime when we're all outdoors. Getting that lightning alert, it will detect for lightning in a certain radius closest to you, usually about 5 to 10 miles of your location. Rain alerts, very handy to have. Again, if we're outside, it'll tell you if there's rain heading your way. Interactive radar with street level mapping, very handy if you want to track the storms. If you have the WAFF or the Way 31 weather app, they actually have their own Doppler radars, their own live radars, and put it into the app so you can see the data coming off of that radar. And again, to track the storms, hyperlocal forecasts, of course. And the best part about it, with all these features and functionality, they are free to download on the iTunes, or rather the App Store and the Google Play Store. Now, the next type of alert is geared mainly towards UAH students and parents of UAH students. It's a UAlert. Now, you probably have already signed up for this service early on in the semester, but if you're not familiar with it already, it's a free emergency alert system that will send alerts through your phone, through text message, through phone call, through email, alerting you of various emergency weather hazards impacting UAH and its campus operations. So for example, if we had a tornado warning for UAH's campus, you'd get alerts sent through UAlert alerting you of that. If school had to close, if campus had to close for any reason, you'd get that alert sent through UAlert as well. They also have an online automated presence, if you will. If you follow the Facebook and Twitter UAlert pages, you'll get those same type of alerts through that way as well. Now, keep in mind though that this is thought to be meant to be a complement to the other types of alerts that we were just talking about. Don't use this, of course, as your primary source of information, because if you live off campus, for example, some of the alerts that you might be getting through UAlert may or may not be impacting you. If you think of UAH on a map, we're in a little dot on the western side of Madison County, west of downtown Huntsville, right off of 72 and University. Just a small little dot on the map. If we had a tornado warning for western Madison County, chances are we'd be including that. But if you live, let's say, up in Hazel Green, you might get that alert through UAlert, but it may not be affecting you. And the vice versa is the same too. If you lived in Hazel Green and there was a tornado warning for northern Madison County, you would not get that alert through UAlert because it's not impacting UAH's campus. So keep that in mind if you have it, but it is a good, again, complimentary service. All the professors, lecturers have it in their syllabus, and most everybody signs up for it anyway at the beginning of the semester. So it's a good service to have, and it is, of course, free to use. In addition to all these other methods of receiving warnings, we also have the TV weather coverage, local news coverage to receive weather warnings. Now, Madison County, in the city of Huntsville, of course, we're part of the Huntsville-Decatur Designated Market Area, or DMA simply. I can think of it as just simply the broadcast area. And here in Huntsville, we have 4 local TV stations, WHT News 19, Way 31, WAFF 48, and WZDX Fox 54. Now, all 4 of those stations will come on and they'll provide live, wall-to-wall severe weather coverage anytime there's a tornado warning in their coverage area, which again is mostly North Alabama and a few counties up in southern Middle Tennessee. And you can see some of the visual examples of that coverage. Unfortunately, the TV is kind of blocking them out, but there's Jason Simpson there, chief meteorologist there at WHT News 19. That was back in 2014 at the Athens tornado. And some more recent examples, of course, there's Brad Travis from WAFF 48 and Emily Owen there, meteorologist there at WZDX Fox 54. And we're very thankful to have people like these folks here that come on, and they may be on for several hours at a time, alerting us, alerting me, alerting you to the various severe weather hazards impacting us here in North Alabama. Not just here in North Alabama, but really most of Alabama. Down in the Birmingham area, for example, all 5 of the stations down there have meteorologists as dedicated as these folks are that will provide those wall-to-wall weather coverage whenever a warning is impacting their coverage area as well. So we're very, very, very thankful to have them. Now, we talked about some of the different ways to receive weather warnings during times of severe weather, but now let's dive into kind of the opposite end. Let's talk about one of the things that you should not be relying on to receive weather warnings, and that is these infamous storm and tornado sirens. Now, when you hear meteorologists or hear broadcast meteorologists, communicators, say don't rely on the sirens, it's not that they just hate the storm sirens. There are very specific reasons why you should not be relying on storm sirens to receive warnings. And one of them is just simply inability to hear. Unless you live right next door to a storm siren, there's a pretty good chance you're not going to be able to hear one, especially at 3 o'clock in the morning. We have nighttime tornadoes here sometimes. The weather radio, your phone's app, those will alert you, those will wake you up, letting you know that there's threatening weather. A siren will not do that for you, especially at night. Second, the distance between you and the siren. Again, going back to that first point, unless you live right next door to one, you're not going to be able to hear it more than likely, especially indoors. Storm sirens were not meant to be heard indoors. That's why they're called outdoor warning sirens. Secondly, there could be different things blocking the output of the siren, different things between you and the storm siren itself. For example, heavy rainfall. We live here in the southeast. We're right next to the Gulf of Mexico, so oftentimes when we have severe storms, they're what's called high precipitation. They're HP supercells. Those have a lot of heavy rainfall, large hail. So those can block the siren's output. So you would not be able to hear those sirens. Additionally, there are other things. Again, we live here in Alabama. We have a lot of mountainous terrain, a lot of trees. Those can block the sirens out, but even buildings too. So again, that's another reason. Another reason rather, you should not be relying on the sirens. The third is simply the sirens are an aging technology. They're an aging infrastructure. You know, the sirens as a whole, generally speaking, they go all the way back to the 1950s. They are Cold War relics. Quite literally, they alerted you back then to the threat of a nuclear attack. And in around the 1970s, that's when they started transitioning from civil defense sirens to more of these storm and tornado sirens. So yeah, Cold War era technology, right? But we're not in the 1950s anymore, 1970s. We have better sources of information at our disposal. For example, back in the 1970s, the whole concept of severe weather coverage on TV, wasn't a thing, simply. And then by the time the 80s rolled around, yeah, you might be lucky if you got a 30-second commercial cut in, letting you know severe weather. You might get a crawl at the bottom of your screen, or maybe a little message at the top saying there's a tornado warning. And part of that is not, not that the meteorologists didn't know anything. It's just simply the technology, the radar technology specifically, wasn't as advanced as it is today. And then late 80s, early 90s, you had the implementation of Doppler radar. And then by the time the mid-90s rolled around, you had people like James Spann and Dan Satterfield who kind of set the standard, kind of paved the way from just, the brief cut-ins to more of the 80s and 90s to more of a wall-to-wall severe weather coverage that we see today. And then even by the 2000s, once we turn to the new century, the new millennium, we have the rise of internet sources. National Weather Service has the internet presence online. And then even in the 2010s with social media and weather apps, social media in particular, not only can you receive information that way, but you can also disseminate information outward. You can send storm reports that way and receive that weather information, and of course the weather apps that we were just talking about. So, with all of these different ways, different methods to receive warnings, it kind of in a way makes the sirens a little obsolete. And it doesn't appear that for very much longer that these sirens will be maintained very much longer. All right, now we talked about the different ways to stay informed of severe weather, but now let's just kind of talk briefly about some of the ways to prepare for significant and severe weather. Of course, we talked about it, having that way of getting warnings, whether it's through your NOAA Weather Radio, your weather app, TV weather coverage. You have to have ways, and multiple ways even, of getting those warnings. And secondly, you want to have that storm action plan. You want to know it, you want to review it with your family. If your family does fire drills, you want to treat it as like a fire drill. For starters, you want to know where you want to go in your house if there's severe weather, whether that's your basement, if you got to go to a community shelter. You want to know where you're going to go when there's severe weather. You also want to have protective equipment on. We'll talk about that in just a second. And then have that weather safety kit. And in your weather safety kit, these are a couple of things to include. Now, I know it's a lot of stuff here, but this just gives you kind of a general idea of some of the things that you might want to include in your families, and you or your family's weather safety kit. Of course, a first aid kit, always handy in case someone gets injured in your family, any medications that you may need, non-perishable foods, at least 3 days supply of that. Bottled water is good as well. Any important documents that are important to you or your family. I know in my family we have them in a dry black grab bag, if you will. We just take that with us to our storm shelter whenever there's a tornado warning. Portable chargers, very, very handy. Of course, we all have cell phones, most of us. And if we have power outages, which are sometimes inevitable during severe weather, you want to have that. You want to continue to have that connection with the weather warnings, if that's, or rather to watch the severe weather coverage through the station's apps. But we always recommend not only having your portable chargers with you, but also charging up your phones before a severe weather event, so that the portable chargers may not have to be necessary to have power to your phone. Of course, that battery-powered emergency radio or NOAA Weather Radio, we talked about that as well. Flashlights and battery is good, again, in case the power goes out. We don't recommend candles because, of course, those are a fire hazard. Portable air horn and whistle. Now, the reason why we have this included in there is in case you get injured, in case you need help, if you're trapped under something after a tornado, for example, you need to have some way to communicate outward that you need help. Or for example, if you're separated from your family during the severe weather, again, you want to have that way to communicate outward that, I'm over here, or that I might need help to the first responders or to anybody else on the scene of the storm. Helmets are good to have as well. Again, does protect your head from that flying or falling debris. It doesn't matter if it's a bike, a football, baseball helmet, something to protect your head, because unfortunately a lot of the tornado deaths that we have, a good bit of them can be prevented just simply by having some protection of your head. Now, if you don't have a helmet, if you've got a sturdy textbook, if you remember back in elementary school, middle school, when they did the school tornado drills, they'd ask you to, grab a book off your desk, put that on top of you. That's sturdy enough that any debris that falls will just kind of bounce off of it and protect your head. Blankets, pillows are good. Just kind of wrap yourself around that. Any debris that may fall can bounce off of those. Hard sole shoes are good as well. After the storm, if you're coming out from your storm shelter, or maybe you're getting out of your bathroom or your closet, if you've been hit by the tornado, there might be some debris, there might be some scattered glass on the floors. Obviously, you don't want to be stepping that barefooted, so have those hard sole shoes. And if you've got them, they're good to have, but if you don't, that's okay. Shadow resistant goggles, that's just extra protection from that flying and falling debris, protecting your eyes from that. We hope that these storm safety tips will be helpful and useful for you and your family. Now, for some of you, if you've lived here for a long time, it's a lot of information that we presented may be elementary to you, but it's always a good idea to kind of review with yourself, with your family members, some of these safety tips. And we thank you so much for watching these weather safety videos. And if you want to stay connected with the department, you can do that with our department, our student organizations in the Atmospheric and Earth Science Department and the College of Science. We're on Facebook, we're on Twitter, we're on Instagram, and of course our website there as well, nsstc.uah.edu, and the College of Science website, uah.edu/science. So again, thank you so much for watching, and we hope you enjoy the rest of the Weather Fest.